The observation chamber hummed with the low thrum of atmospheric regulators as Mira Solis stretched her arms overhead, fingers splayed wide toward the metallic ceiling 12 feet above. It was a simple exercise, one she performed every morning aboard the eschaton, to maintain her flexibility in the ship's slightly lower than Earth gravity. She didn't notice the 6 pairs of luminescent eyes watching her from the viewing portal. Ravik Thorn pressed his scaled snout against the transparent barrier, his vertical pupils dilating with fascination. At 9 cycles old, roughly equivalent to a human adolescent, he was the eldest of the Krelth cubs assigned to the Xenological Observation Program. His younger clutchmates clustered behind him, their chitinous ridges bristling with curiosity. "Look at her limbs," Ravik hissed in the clicking tongue of his species. "They extend so far. No crouch, no spring preparation. Just reaching." The human woman below seemed entirely unaware of her audience. She rolled her shoulders, tilted her head from side to side, then reached upward again. This time, she rose onto the balls of her feet, extending her already impressive height by several more inches. Without thinking, Ravik coiled his powerful haunches and leaped. His claws scraped against the ceiling of the observation deck, a full 8 feet high before he landed in a predator's crouch. The other cubs chirped in alarm, but Ravik's attention remained fixed on the human. She had barely lifted her heels from the ground, yet she had reached nearly as high as his explosive jump had taken him. "Impossible," whispered Senna, the smallest cub. Ravik's triple-jointed fingers flexed against the deck plating. He had studied humans for 3 cycles now, ever since the Krelth Dominion had made first contact with the strange bipeds from Earth. Everything about them defied logic. They were slow, achingly slow compared to Krelth hunters. Their senses were dull, their bodies soft and vulnerable. They had no natural weapons, no armored hide, no venom sacs, yet they had conquered their solar system. They had built ships that rivaled Krelth engineering, and now, one of them served as the xenological liaison aboard the Dominion's flagship, living among predators without apparent fear. Below, Mira Solis had moved to a different exercise. She bent forward at the waist, keeping her legs straight, and placed her palms flat against the floor. Then, slowly, deliberately, she straightened her spine 1 vertebra at a time until she stood upright again. Ravik felt his brain struggle to process what he'd witnessed. A Krelth warrior could never bend like that. Their spines were rigid battle columns, designed to absorb impact and transfer force. But the human folded and unfolded like she had no bones at all, yet moments later stood perfectly straight and stable. "She's broken," Senna declared. "Humans must be broken creatures. That's why they're so weak." "No," Ravik said slowly, his analytical mind beginning to piece together a disturbing pattern. "Not broken. Different." He thought about the endurance tests he'd observed. Krelth hunters were ambush predators. They could sprint at devastating speeds for short bursts, then needed hours to recover. But humans? Mira Solis ran on the exercise track for an hour every day without stopping. Not fast, but constant. Relentless. He thought about the environmental controls. Krelth required narrow temperature bands to function optimally. Too cold, and they became sluggish. Too hot, and they overheated quickly. But humans regulated their own temperature somehow, sweating through their skin like some bizarre internal cooling system. Mira wore the same simple clothing whether the ship's quarters were set for Krelth comfort or for the icy conditions preferred by the Silthar engineers. He thought about her hands. Ravik looked down at his own claws, perfect instruments for tearing, slashing, killing. Then he watched as Mira picked up a datapad with those strange 5-digited appendages, her thumb opposing the other fingers in a grip that allowed for microscopic precision. Those same hands could type on keyboards, manipulate tools, perform surgery, or he'd seen the security footage form into surprisingly effective fists. "They don't need to jump," Ravik said, more to himself than to his clutchmates. "They just reach. That's what they do." Senna cocked her head, confused. "What do you mean?" Ravik gestured at the human below with one claw. We're sprint hunters. We explode into action, strike, then rest. We're built for the killing moment. But humans? They're persistence predators. They don't burst, they extend. Their bodies are designed to keep reaching, keep moving, keep adapting. They don't need to jump to the ceiling because they'll just build stairs. Or a ladder. Or a machine that flies. The other cubs fell silent, processing this. Watch, Ravik continued. Below, Mira had retrieved a box from a high shelf, not by jumping, but by dragging over a chair and climbing up. She doesn't have our natural advantages, so she changes the environment. She reaches for what she can't touch and finds a way to touch it anyway. That's cheating, one of the younger cubs protested. Is it? Ravik's eyes glowed brighter. Or is that their predation strategy? We're faster, stronger, better armed, but they're stubborn. They see the ceiling and refuse to accept they can't reach it. So they don't jump, they build. They don't adapt to their environment, they make the environment adapt to them. The observation chamber fell quiet, except for the atmospheric hum. Ravik watched as Mira Solis completed her morning routine, moving through stretches and exercises that showcased the bizarre flexibility and endurance of her species. She never noticed the predator cubs above her, learning perhaps the most important lesson of xenological study. The most dangerous predators aren't always the fastest or the strongest. Sometimes, they're simply the ones who refuse to stop reaching. As Mira left the chamber, Ravik remained pressed against the viewing portal, his young mind grappling with a troubling realization. His people had welcomed humanity into the galactic community as curious prey species who'd somehow stumbled into space travel. But what if they were wrong? What if humans weren't prey at all? What if they were predators who simply hunted on a timescale the Krelth couldn't comprehend, patient, adaptive, and eternally reaching for the next unreachable thing? Ravik's claws scraped against the floor in an unconscious gesture of unease. He had jumped to reach the ceiling in a burst of predatory power. It had taken everything he had, but Mira Solis had simply stretched her arms upward, calm and unhurried, and come just as close, without even trying. That, Ravik thought, was somehow far more terrifying.